I love books. I love reading. I love writing. And it's something about showing what you love to somebody else and seeing the light and go on in their eyes. It's like you flipped a switch.
Claire Applewhite is one of the most phenomenal people that I have met. She is talented. She is an author. She is an editor. She's a concert pianist. She's a volunteer, an extraordinary volunteer.
I joined the St. Louis Writers Guild. And they said, "You want to be our publicity chair?" And I said, "Sure." And then they said, "You want to be a competition judge?" They put me in charge of grades 4 through 6 throughout the state of Missouri. I had 200 plus entries. These kids were pouring their hearts out to me, a stranger. They were gripping stories. I couldn't put them down.
Some of the kids who wrote the best pieces were the kids that they didn't have the background, and they didn't have the spelling, and they didn't have the grammar skills.
I love to see these kids write. That's why I didn't want to see people disqualified, because the format was bad.
She took it upon herself to find out how she could help these children.
The reality is there is a baseline universal language that we do need to teach.
Being Claire and wanting to help more than one person at a time, she developed the Voices of Excellence program at Loyola Academy. So boys who are in 6th through 8th grade get this amazing teaching and nurturing.
I want them to see that there's no reason they can't excel. They're very intelligent. I felt that it was important that they also learn public speaking. Felt that they also had kind of a reward for this.
Some of them are chosen to give a speech, and the ones selected go to the Missouri Athletic Club downtown, and they present their speech.
Greeting the parents as they came in, and that's one of my favorite things to do because they're so proud, as they should be. And this father came in and he had his work uniform on, and he said, "I told my boss today I need an extra hour. My boy is getting an award." That really got to me, because the hope in his eyes, I didn't expect that.
She does a little bit of everything, but she wants to make a difference. You know, she's small. She's a little girl, but she's mighty. She's just quite incredible.
Now in its 6th year, the students have won scholarships to Chaminade, St. Lucie High, Vianney. Many have gone on to colleges. They have confidence.
My career has been television news for almost 40 years. It was a platform that sent me to all sorts of places where I ended up volunteering, or I would do something because it was for my job, but I'd go back and volunteer because I loved it so much. I think at some point where I kind of stepped back and looked at the things I was doing, I realized, whoa, the common thread is kids. Everything that I really had a passion for had to do with kids.
Christine worked to do reporting to help organizations, but then she was drawn into it personally, and that's what I love to see. We worked together for so many years, and I would see her do a story, but then she would go visit a child in the hospital, or she would volunteer to host a luncheon in her home. She's worked with Children's Miracle Network, Lift for Life, Backstoppers, Kids in the Middle, Matthews Dickey Boys and Girls Club.
And I would say that Matthews Dickey's Boys and Girls Club is probably #1 on that list, because for a long time it was Matthews Dickey's Boys Club, and Wendy Weiss and I helped launch the Girls Club, and for 26 years we did the fashion show for the girls there, among other things. But what I loved about that was it wasn't just about, here are these girls walking, down this runway. We would highlight their academic achievements and their goals and give their grade point average. I mean, make them feel good, from the inside out, where, you know, the spotlight was on them. And you could just see it. You could just see when they started to walk in, and you start talking about them, you know, here's the future Dr. So-and-so, how excited they were to get that kind of attention.
Christine understands that children face all kinds of challenges today, and it's important to her to make sure that they have avenues and access to help if they need it, whether it's medical or socially or academically.
I get so much from being around the kids, and what I love is to see a child's face just, you know, light up. My mom always saw the good in every kid, and I think that set the stage for me, kind of, you know, looking through her eyes and her lens at children.
Her mom taught her to love unconditionally, and I think that resonates when Christine goes into these organizations and sees the families or the children, and she wants to connect and she wants to really help these families. And I think that came from her mom, who her mom would take kids in and want to help people all the time. Her father, Jack Buck, taught her that it was a privilege to be a broadcaster, but also there's a commitment involved there that you have to give back to the community. And she embraced that and used her platform in media as a catalyst for telling stories about all these great organizations in St. Louis and getting the message out.
Seeing the success stories of kids as they've gone on to do incredible things, I think that's how it's come back for me. And just to realize that maybe I had a small part to do with it because of the connections that I've had.
Nine years ago, I moved to St. Louis, and all my family and friends thought it would be a temporary move. I still remember when I looked at the map, and I said, "Wait, I didn't realize St. Louis was so far in the middle of the country." And I have absolutely fallen in love with the place. You could not pry me out of it. And a big part of it is the cultural institutions here. I love every single one of them. The institutions they're world class, they're accessible, their mission is to really serve the entire community, the city and the county. And I love this place so much, so I love helping those institutions achieve their mission. I love helping them connect with their audiences. I especially love trying to help kids get exposed to them. I think it is such a special thing for children to grow up surrounded and enriched by the arts.
Well, I got to know Adrienne when she was relatively new in St. Louis, and she started coming to performances at Opera Theater of St. Louis. And to be honest, she was at first a real opera skeptic, interested but not a self-described fan by any means.
I had never liked opera before I moved to St. Louis. You could not drag me to an opera.
And then she agreed to help us with what at the time was a new project, which is that we formed a group called our Engagement and Inclusion Task Force. And this was all about building the young, diverse audience of the 21st century for an arts organization.
So I love trying to touch the arts and make the arts accessible to people, to support the next generation of artists, to support museum professionals who are sort of on the front lines of all of this, for all of this.
Honestly, don't know how any one person maintains all the volunteer commitments that she has, whether it's through serving as president at the St. Louis Art Museum, or her role at Laumeier Sculpture Park, now December Literary Magazine. In her role as chair of the arts facet for the Lynx, she has engineered collaborations for Opera Theater of St. Louis. She serves on the board of the Visionary Awards for Women. The diversity of organizations for which she makes time, it's honestly astonishing. And yet whenever I reach out to Adrienne because I need her advice, which I often do, she is always right there and ready and willing to make time.
Through the arts, I think we find the best parts of ourselves. I think the arts are a vehicle for conversation, for helping people to connect across difference, for people to have hard conversations, difficult conversations about things in ways that are productive.
She cares deeply about art and what it means for people, but she also cares about people.
But whether they're third graders or medical school students or graduate students, I think that giving people access to the arts can really transform their lives.
Well, when I was a young stay-at-home mother, I wanted a few hours of adult conversation, so I was looking for something to do, and volunteering seemed like a way to get out of the house and talk to other adults. I didn't know it would lead up to all this.
Everything that I have learned was at the knee of Marlene Hammerman. Such an example of commitment to making the community a better place, of advocating for people who cannot advocate for themselves.
I can remember some of my earliest memories are walking up and down our street in University City or standing in front of a grocery store collecting for a charity. And my mother would never say no. And so we were doing this a lot together. And I learned from that mother-daughter bonding experience that you always help those less fortunate than yourself. In 1976, I was looking for something in my field, which was social work, and I applied to be a counselor at Reproductive Health Services. What I found was that early on was that women had multiple challenges in their lives. They had domestic violence issues, healthcare issues, extreme poverty, lack of educational opportunities, and so I wanted to do something on all of these issues, on a broad range of social justice issues, and that's what brought me to the National Council of Jewish Women.
The mission of NCJW is to improve the quality of life for women, children, and families, and to safeguard individual and civil rights. And it's really part of Marlene's DNA.
The main way that I have been working is through advocacy.
Marlene has been a vice president of advocacy for NCJW, and then she was the state public affairs chair for the state of Missouri, which is a national appointment.
I lobby in both Jefferson City and Washington, D.C. for bills. They're all an effort to work on social justice and to improve the lives of women, children, and families.
Watching her do testimony, watching how she conducts herself when she is in a room with a legislator, listening, asking good questions, it's really informed who I have become.
We're always looking for a bill that will kind of bend the arc of justice just a little bit more, and not for miracles, but for small improvements in people's daily lives. And we've been successful in certain issues, national issues, the Family and Medical Leave Act, other things like the Hate Crimes Act, the Affordable Care Act. There are just many issues that NCJW takes a stand on. So for me to inspire and to lead and to grow a new generation of advocates is just what keeps me going.
My son was at CBC and he was on this incredible soccer team, and the coach wanted to do a community service project, and another mom on the team said, well, let's do a coat drive. And we had 170 coats in these big plastic bags, and we delivered them down to Elliott Elementary School.
16 years ago, Rose and another woman identified a need down in the inner city schools with kids that were going to school with no coats, with blue arms, freezing, not able to learn.
I was standing outside Elliott, and it was 26 degrees, and who comes bounding up the stairs but this beautiful little boy in his dad's leather coat. And his arms are hitting the stairs as he's walking up. And he said, my dad let me wear his coat today.
So she pulled her friends in and said, can you help me?
And that day, we gave out 170 coats to a school of 250 kids. And who comes through that day but this little boy? I put him in a navy blue coat, and I zipped him up. I put his hood on him. And I said, oh my gosh, you are so handsome. Look at you. And he said, my dad's gonna be so happy that I'm gonna be warm today. I couldn't understand how children 20 minutes away from where I lived didn't have a coat or didn't have basic needs.
And she just started making connections, one after the other, and just pulled people in.
And I became friends with the teacher who called, and she would tell me different things that were needed, you know, hygiene items or school supplies, underwear and socks, food, and I would send out an email to all my friends, and they would drop stuff off on my front porch, and then I would deliver it once a month, and I'd deliver it down to the school. And this teacher moved to another school the next year, so I had 2 schools. And then the next year, she moved to a third school, and I had 3 schools. And that was 16 years ago. Now we're at 27 schools, 35,000 kids in St. Louis since then, 7,000 kids every week. We serve them with everything they could possibly need.
We're serving them with mental health, dental care, health care, shoes and basic needs, school supplies, books, everything a child needs to get to school and break down all those barriers to learning. It's just spectacular.
When the Little Bit Foundation is in a school, right away, dramatically, there's a decrease in discipline problems and suspensions and in-house suspensions. So what we know is if by 6th grade, if we can increase attendance, then there's a higher percentage of children that will graduate from high school. And what I've learned is that we have the most amazing children in our city that will be our future. They will be our leaders. And if they're just given what they need, there's no end to what the capabilities are in these kids. So I feel incredibly blessed. People say to us all the time, I think you should change the name because you're doing so much. You aren't a little bit, you're a lot.
There's a common thread through things that I do, which is mostly about history, and it involves houses and cemeteries and those kind of things.
We have a more vibrant community because of Margaret.
Little projects that you do in your community help make the quality of life in your community even better. It makes a good place to live, a good place to work, and a good place to visit. So I think that all those little kind of things are important to make the community alive.
She has projects that inspire people. And she's terrific. People just say yes. The whole room says, yeah, I'll do that. I'll do that for Margaret.
I actually love several different things. One of them is restoration. I'm involved with the Lucy Haskell Playhouse, which is near and dear to my heart. Property was owned by the Haskell family. For the 5th birthday of their oldest daughter, Lucy, they gave her a playhouse. Sadly, she died at the age of 9. Mrs. Haskell in 1932 donated her property, the house and the playhouse, to the city of Alton. And so with that tragedy became a great gift for the city. The exterior of the house was, of course, covered with lead paint, and that was our first project. And then to restore any carpentry work that needed to be done. There was tuck pointing, caulking the painting, and getting all that done. The house is alive, and it's full of promise and joy to spread to future generations. The house is available for use for children's parties as well as adult parties. It's fun for kids of all ages. They love it. I just can't believe the little girl got that for her 5th birthday. And of course, they asked their parents, can they have one too? Another organization that I really like is Wreaths Across America.
And this involves the Color Guard, the Boy Scouts, veterans, wives, mothers. And on one day, they put these beautiful wreaths on every veteran's grave. It's a very sentimental, very emotional.
To remember the fallen, to honor those who serve and teach our children the value of freedom, says everything.
It's wonderful. It's brought our community together.
Learning about history and knowing about where you've come from helps you get to where you're going, and I think those type of things just really make me want to become a part of them.
Margaret, in conjunction with Alton Little Theater and the YWCA, has promoted, and here again, brand new, something we've never had.
It's a living history program. It's something that's put on in the city cemetery every year, every fall.
People step out from behind the tombstone and give the history of the person who's buried. We have people come from all over to see vintage voices. It's a great idea. Here again, this is Margaret. I like to say it's that Margaret magic.
One
day I read this article about Dress for Success out of New York. And I thought it had to do with the industry I was in, but it was about providing interview clothing to women that were transitioning from disadvantaged situations back into the workforce. And I thought, oh, this is great. I'll do it one day. One day when I retire, one day when kids are gone, I can do this. I would wake up in the night thinking about this thing. And I thought, I'll get it started and somebody else can take it over. I had no intention of being here 19 years later. Before we even had things set up, there was this huge clothing drive. And I remember I got a call from a homeless shelter. And they asked me, they said, you know, Kathy, there's this young woman, she has a job interview in 2 hours. Can you help her? And I'm thinking, all I have is clothes in my trunk. And we looked inside, and of course, there would be a suit that was her size. She tried it on, and it fit her beautifully. She turned and she looked at the mirror, and she put her hand out, and she had a tear coming down her face. She said, I've never seen myself look like this before. I need to touch the mirror to make sure that it's me.
She is someone that is looking for the good in people and looking for how to help. She's a leader. She enrolls us to want to help. She engages us to want to be part of that change here. I mean, she even engaged her husband to come on board.
He said, but I have this idea for a transportation program. He started another nonprofit called Wheels for Success, where people donate cars, we refurbish them, and then we award them to families, and at that time, single moms. So in 2001, we merged our organizations together to become Connections to Success.
They knew that people needed more than the outfit. They needed transportation. They needed mentoring.
Over the years, what we've developed is a holistic model that is called Pathways to Success. And the model that we've worked on for all these years has lifelong engagement. We begin with a class, helping them to develop critical thinking skills, and then identifying what are their passions and skills and career path. And then we help them with employment and provide life coaching and mentoring. And we walk along beside them for, it's a lifetime. It's not really about a program. And so today, when I look back and I see literally thousands and thousands, we've served over 30,000 women in St. Louis and their families. And I think about that, and it's so rewarding and so humbling to be a small part of some life change that can happen.
These are people who were on welfare or maybe in prison, and now their children are college graduates.
I see going forward that with a future that there really is hope to really move that needle on poverty and on hopelessness. And I think they'll be the leaders to make that happen.
Everybody's got a story, and everybody has the fundamental need to be heard. And when you volunteer, you get that opportunity to hear someone. You get the opportunity to interact at a granular level and say, I hear you, and I'm gonna help.
There's nothing that gets Elizabeth more energized than seeing a need and wanting to make a difference.
I find great joy in connecting things, in seeing the needs that one nonprofit might have. Maybe it's Lydia's House, trying to find a place to house women or find a place to run an operation that they need for their women, and saying, I know an attorney that might be able to help with something we're trying to write, or I know a place or a person that might fund that need. I love the synergies of then watching those people connect and things come together.
She has worked with organizations as diverse as the St. Louis Symphony, Lydia's House, which is a shelter for women who have been subject to domestic abuse. She's done tremendous work with Siteman and other healthcare organizations as a cancer survivor herself, a mentoring program with the St. Louis Public Schools.
I like to fix things. And if it's somebody who can't read or somebody that needs clothing so that they can go to the school and be taught, or if it's a board that has a fabulous mission and they just need funding, there's a ton of money. I can go find money. I'll get you money if that's the problem. Fix things by empowering people so that they then can turn around and go help fix something.
The interesting thing about Elizabeth is not only does she serve on boards and serve very capably on boards, but she also rolls up her sleeves and gets her hands dirty, and she deals with the messy stuff.
So it's the women that I've met at Lydia's house, and it's the kids in the public schools that are really my inspiration. And what really makes me passionate about volunteer work is when a child first sees hope, when a child sees, oh, I'm going to graduate from high school, or I'm going to go to beauty school, or I'm going to take a coding class, and I liked the coding class, and I can see myself as a coder. That, to me, makes all of the hard work, whether I'm raising money or whether I'm spending week after week on multiplication tables, worth it.
What I love most about what I do is being able to see that what I do actually makes a difference in somebody else's life. If I see people with disabilities living better lives, that's important. If I see people who don't understand disability changing how they think about disabled people, that's important. If I see a building going up and it's all becoming accessible because it's part of the law, that's making a difference. That's what drives me.
Colleen is a very inspirational person. She, at a very young age, I think it was right out of college, decided that she wanted to help people. And at the time, she didn't really know what she was going to do until she met Max in the nursing home and saw the plight of people with disabilities.
My late husband, Max J. Starkloff, was living there. He had a spinal cord injury. He was quadriplegic. It was fairly typical that people with very significant disabilities would live in nursing homes. His purpose was to get out of that nursing home and also to change how people with disabilities live. That became such a niche for me. I felt very called to be doing that, and of course, in the process, fell in love with him.
At that time, she became committed to helping people with disabilities.
When Max and I first started out, people said we were crazy. They said, you'll never get lifts on buses, you'll never get curb cuts, you'll never have people with disabilities living in a community, you'll never have this and you'll never have that. And they said, you're not going to have an accessible world. The United States is the most accessible country in the world today.
Whether it's a march here in St. Louis, whether it's in Jefferson City or Washington, D.C., you will always find Colleen Starkloff at the forefront of advocacy for people with disabilities.
Many, many of us banded together all across the country and said, we need to do this. Our people need to be free to live in a society like everybody else.
She's just a tireless advocate for getting people with disabilities out of poverty and into jobs. One of her newest initiatives, and she always has plenty of initiatives, is Dream Big. And this is aimed at high school kids with disabilities to convince them that they can get competitive jobs in the workplace, because the first attitude you have to change is the attitude of the person with the disability who is told by society that they can't do what they see everybody else doing.
I am very proud of the fact that through the work that we do now at the Starkloff Disability Institute, that we are seeing young people with disabilities, very significant disabilities, getting into jobs in corporate America. To be able to work your whole career to change a society, to improve the lives of people, and then see young people growing up expecting to live in the community and being able to fully participate because the community is accessible is unbelievably rewarding. And I've lived to see that, as did Max. That's amazing to me.
My inspiration comes first because I am very lucky and I have a great family and everyone is healthy. And, you know, I know that you can't take that for granted.
Well, I've had the fortune of working with ASHA for the last 18 years. We had put an article about our pediatric hospice program in the St. Louis Post-Dispatch.
It was an article about a family who was going through the loss of their child. What it kept referencing was the resources that the WINGS program provided for them that made it just a little bit easier. The organization is a program that helps families who have children with life-limiting, life-threatening illnesses. There's also a component to this that is kids who are grieving the loss of someone important to them. That is the WINGS program, is helping those families on that journey.
We did not have any publicity that really educated the community about what we did. And so ASHA came forward and said, I want to do that for you.
About that time, we immediately sort of banded together and formed the Friends of WINGS.
And the Friends of WINGS really do special things for our kids that are on service. They're creating situations where children can celebrate life.
We are always focused on making memories. Sometimes it's directed at a child, sometimes it's directed at an adult, sometimes we only have a few days, sometimes we have a few months. It's just trying to make the most of whatever that personal journey is for the family and making it a little bit easier for them, making sure that they have some memories that they can reflect back on that will bring them joy and allow them to not always feel super sad when something so tragic has happened to them.
She finds the happiness and she makes it happen. One of the programs we have is called Wings on Wheels. It takes grief support out into the community.
Another example is a program that we started called Joyful Celebrations. Essentially, anytime a nurse says this family could use a little bit of celebration, we create a reason to celebrate.
We may have a teen that has never gone to a prom. I don't know how she hears about it, but she hears that that's the case and she makes that happen.
And there's a new part of Joyful Celebrations that I am just so excited about, and that is called Remember the Love. On what would have been a child's birthday, and they've since passed, we are sneak surprising the family the night before and flocking their yard with hearts and a big heart in the middle that says we remember the love. They wake up in the morning on what would have been their child's birthday.
And that's who she is, and that's what she is all about. Making life easier and celebrating life to the very, very end.
With the help of so many people in the community, so many volunteers, and this incredible staff, what we've been able to create, it's pretty awesome.